death of people. Death, 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 horrible death.
You have stadiums of people chanting, "Kill the farmer," and then you have farmers being killed, but still don't draw any connection between those two things. Ever since the death of Nelson Mandela, it's fair to call Cyril Ramaphosa one of the few surviving founding fathers of post-apartheid South Africa. He helped to write the country's new constitution, which would supposedly usher in a new era of prosperity and equality. He also oversaw the transition to the new government. And as South Africa descended into lawlessness and squalor over the ensuing 30 years, Ramaphosa gradually accumulated more wealth and power until he finally became the country's president in 2018. He's currently worth something like $500 million, even as the vast majority of South Africans now live in extreme poverty. What this means is that Ramaphosa is the personification of South Africa's post-colonial experiment. When he drafted the new constitution, he presumably did not foresee that by 2025, the country would have the single highest unemployment rate of any country in the world at 40%. He certainly didn't tell anyone that he eventually planned to sign new laws that would disenfranchise and rob white farmers, or that white people would be systematically slaughtered in their homes. But all that has happened. And yet, for all this time, no one, and certainly no world leader, has held this deranged despot accountable for any of that. Instead, it's been something of a tradition in Washington to pretend that South Africa is somehow a great ally to the United States and to treat Ramaphosa as royalty, as Joe Biden did a few years ago. But that tradition came to a very abrupt end yesterday in the Oval Office when Donald Trump did something that no other political figure has ever done. He told Ramaphosa to his face, in the most public forum imaginable, that he's a fraud who is overseeing a white genocide. And in the process, Trump took a blowtorch to a mythology that pretty much every politician from both parties has been desperate to uphold for several decades. Now, in order to understand the importance of what Donald Trump communicated here, you have to first see exactly how he communicated it. Now, first, of course, Ramaphosa asked the United States for money, because that's any visiting dignitary now. That's what they do. They come hat in hand as beggars asking for our money. And in this case, he's done that because he's run his country into the ground and they can't even feed themselves anymore. Then a reporter asked a patronizing question about what it would take for Trump to stop repeating supposedly false claims about white genocide in South Africa. In other words, the reporter's basically calling Trump a liar and asking him what it would take for him to stop lying. And here's how that went.
Our main real reason for being here is to foster trade and investment so that we are able to grow our economy with your support, and so that we are also able to address all these societal problems, because criminality thrives when people are unemployed, when they have no other hope to eke out a living. So that is what we need to resolve.
President decides, what would it take for you to be convinced that there's no white genocide in South Africa?
Well, I can answer that for the President. It's for him. No, seriously.
I'd rather have him answer.
Yeah, I'd rather answer that. It will be.
Our President will respond to you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. President.
It will take President Trump listening to the voices of South Africans, some of whom are his good friends.
So, after begging for cash, Ramaphosa validates what the reporter is saying, is being patronizing to the President of the United States, to our president. He says Donald Trump needs to listen to the people of South Africa in order to stop lying about the alleged genocide of white people. It's probably the most obnoxious answer that he could have come up with, especially after dozens of South Africans just fled the country in fear of their lives. But Trump was prepared for it. First of all, Trump asked one of the white golfers that Ramaphosa brought with him, this is a two-time U.S. Open winner named Retief Goosen, what the situation was like in South Africa. And the golfer responded that his father's friends who own farms have been murdered and the farms are constantly being torched. Watch.
I grew up in an area in South Africa that is a farmland area, Polokwane.
Yeah.
And there is some issues up there, obviously. My dad was a property developer as well as a part-time farmer. And yeah, some of these buddy farmers got killed. The farm is still going. My brothers run it. But it's a constant battle with farms they're trying to burn the farms down. to chase you away. So it is a concern to try and make a living as a farmer. And at the end, without farmers, there's no food on the plate. So we need the farmers
Your
to
brother
produce
loves
the food.
farming, right? He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't even want to do what you're doing, right? They love farming. They don't want to leave. But it's a struggle.
Yeah, and food and fresh water is the most important thing in life. Without those two things, you can't survive.
How is the water there?
The water is great, obviously. All the water comes out of the borehole, out of ground for us down there. But yeah, it is a battle to get the water out sometimes when all the equipment gets stolen all the time that you're trying to get the
So
water
does
out.
your family and your brother, do they feel safe on the farm?
They live behind electric fences, try and be at night safe. But it is constant whenever you leave that something could happen. And
There's nowhere to live.
both of them has been attacked in their houses. My mom's been attacked in her house when she was 80. So it is difficult.
So this is a pretty extraordinary moment because keep in mind, this is one of the golfers that the president of South Africa brought to the Oval Office as part of the South Africa's, delegation, hoping he'd neutralize the supposedly fake narrative, quote unquote, about white genocide. This is one of the people that the president of South Africa demanded obnoxiously that Trump listen to. He said, all you have to do is listen to these people. And then it's this is essentially a witness for the defense, basically. And this is what he says. So it didn't exactly go as planned, which probably tells you something about the level of planning that South Africa's government is capable of. And things only got worse from there as Trump dimmed the lights in the Oval Office and played a tape of South African politicians openly calling for the murders of white farmers. In other words, Trump once again called Ramaphosa's bluff. He listened to the calls for genocide coming from South Africans, and he made Ramaphosa and the rest of the world listen to it as well. And as you watch this, notice the expression on the South African president's face as he genuinely cannot believe what's happening. Watch.
It has to be responded to.
Yeah, sure.
Let me see the articles, please, if you would. And turn the lights down. Turn the lights down, and just put this on. It's right behind you, Johan.
There's nothing this parliament can do. With or without you, people are going to occupy land. We require no permission from you, from the president, from no one. We don't care. We can do whatever you want to do. Who are you to tell us whether we can occupy land or not? We are going to occupy land. Yeah. South Africa,
a revolution demands that at some point there must be killing, because the killing is part of a revolutionary act. Shoot to kill, Yamaza, kill the poor, the farmer, kill the poor, the farmer, pa, 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 to kill, Yamaza.
Oh, look, these are articles over the last few days. Death of people. Death. Horrible death. Death. I don't know. To pick anyone. White South Africans are fleeing because of the violence and racist laws. And this is all. I mean, I'll give these to you.
No,
so when you say, what would I like to do? I don't know what to do. Look at this. White South African couples say that they were attacked violently. And,
President Trump, when will you go and see for yourself if it isn't true?
well, I could do that. Look, here's burial sites all over the place. These are all white farmers that are being buried.
So just, I mean, it's an incredible moment. Again, remember, the South African president, what queued this up perfectly. And you could not have scripted it any better. Where the South African president said, "Well, what Trump needs to do is just listen." And so then Trump says, "Okay, we'll listen. Yeah, let's do that. Hey, what do you think? Let's all listen. Let's all just listen for a moment." Now, if you have listened to this show or been active on social media over the past year or so, then you've seen or heard most of those clips that we just saw there or heard. And you've heard stories like the ones that Trump just cited. And that's because in South Africa, black politicians have openly called for genocide for many years now. White farmers have been tortured in their homes for decades and attacks that are clearly racially motivated. And instead of stopping the carnage, the government has just passed a law allowing the government to seize land from white people without compensating them. All this has been known for a long time. Debt doesn't just show up one day. It builds little by little: credit cards, car loans, medical bills, and suddenly you're juggling payments, feeling stuck. But here's the good news. You're not stuck. You just need a reset. American Financing, they help homeowners just like you every day. They use your home's equity and roll that high-interest debt into one simple, affordable payment. They're saving homeowners an average of $800 a month. No judgment, no pressure, just real solutions that put you back in control. Imagine breathing again, sleeping again, knowing your future is yours to shape. Starts with one call. It only takes 10 minutes to get started. There are no upfront fees, so it costs nothing to find out how much you can save. And if you start today, you may be able to delay your next 2 mortgage payments. American Financing salary-based consultants are ready to listen and ready to help. Take back your peace of mind with American Financing. Call American Financing today, 866-569-4711. That's 866-569-4711, or visit americanfinancing.net/Walsh. But in their coverage of this Oval Office meeting, the corporate press pretended to be surprised by this footage from South Africa. So before we go back to the Oval Office incident yesterday, let's take a brief look at that coverage. So here's ABC, for example, and watch as they deliberately give the impression that they had never seen anything like this footage before.
There was a striking moment when a reporter asked President Trump, what would it take for you to believe that there are not genocide being committed toward these white farmers? And the South African president, Terry, actually jumped in and he said that it would take President Trump's friends, some of whom he brought, it would take President Trump listening to them to understand that what he believes is untrue. And just to point out as well that President Trump, ever the producer in chief, he dimmed the light. He asked the team to dim the lights at one point, rolled the video to try and bolster his claims. You could see that the South African president during that moment was visibly surprised. And at one point said he didn't know where these videos were coming from. He hadn't seen them. We do not know the source, Terry, of the videos that were played.
We do not know the source of the videos. Pretty extraordinary. I mean, there's only 2 explanations for how that reporter could make a statement like that. Either she's monumentally lazy and she's confessing that no one at ABC News is capable of verifying the authenticity of footage that's been available on the internet for years, or she's deliberately lying to ABC's viewers and trying to get them to believe that the footage might be fake. Those are the options. And if anyone at ABC News was actually interested in the truth about what's happening in South Africa, they'd tell their audience that, yes, the footage is real and the genocide of white people is something that they are openly encouraging over there. Now, for his part, after Trump played the footage in the Oval Office, Ramaphosa offered this response. And as you listen to this, see if you can spot the very familiar sleight of hand trick that he uses. Watch.
Let me clarify that.
Yeah,
Let me clarify that, because what you saw, the speeches that were being made, one, that is not government policy. We have a multi-party democracy in South Africa that allows people to express themselves, political parties to adhere to various policies, and in many cases, or in some cases, those policies do not go along with government policy. Our government policy is completely against what he was saying, even in the parliament. And they're a small minority party, which is allowed to exist in terms of our constitution.
but you do allow them to take land.
No.
You do allow them to take land.
Nobody can
And then
take
when
land.
they take the land, they kill the white farmer. And when they kill the white farmer, nothing happens to them.
No, there is
Nothing happens to
There
them.
is criminality in our country. People who do get killed, unfortunately through criminal activity, are not only white people. Majority of them are black people. And we have now
The
been
farmers are
utilized.
black. The farmers are not black.
We
I don't
now-
say that's good or bad, but the farmers are not black.
Now, first of all, he's right that some of the clips show politicians from minority parties in South Africa. That's true. It's not very reassuring, though, for 2 reasons. First of all, these minority parties are filling stadiums with tens of thousands of people chanting about murdering white farmers. So we're not talking about one fringe politician here. Of course, if it was the reverse, if it was a stadium full of white people chanting, kill the black people, thousands of people saying that, nobody would be reassured by saying, oh, that's just a minority party. So this is a very common sentiment in South Africa. And secondly, as Trump pointed out, the government of South Africa has just signed legislation that calls for white people to lose their homes and their farms without any form of compensation whatsoever. That's a pretty good indication that, indeed, the government is aiding and abetting the ongoing genocide. Now, Ramaphosa had no answer to that. Instead, he simply pointed out that in South Africa, the majority of people who die are black. This is one of those lines that only works if you're a race-obsessed, illiterate moron who doesn't understand the concept of per capita, which, of course, describes most South African leaders. So maybe the talking point works there, but it doesn't work when you're dealing with intelligent people, because intelligent people recognize the significance of the fact that over 80% of the population of South Africa is black. So obviously, most of the people who are killed in South Africa are going to be black. Nobody's disputing that. The relevant question is whether white people, particularly white farmers, are being targeted because of their skin color, and whether they're dying at a rate that's higher than black people, given that they're only something like 6% of the population. And of course, no one in South Africa's government wants to address those questions because they know the truth. White farmers are being killed at dramatically higher rates than you'll see in actual war zones or places like Afghanistan. By some estimates, the murder rate for white farmers is something like 150 per 100,000 people. And that's why white people in South Africa are currently leaving everything behind, their farms, their homes, everything, in order to fly to the United States and stay in, Holiday Inns off the interstate in Idaho. They're not doing that for fun. This is not a tourist trip. They're doing it because their lives are endangered in South Africa. But even after Trump explained all this in the Oval Office, even after Trump played the evidence of white genocide for the press and for the president of South Africa, the corporate press is continuing to lie universally about what's happening in South Africa. They're simply denying that white people are being targeted. So we'll put up a selection of the headlines on the screen now. I'm not going to read all these, but every single one of them accuses Trump of falsely spreading claims of white genocide in South Africa. They say that Trump abused the South African president with lies, even though he literally played 10 minutes of video for him and listened to firsthand testimony from the country. Pretty much every media outlet did the same thing. This is one compilation that Chaya Raichik assembled. Watch.
To the dramatic scene in the Oval Office today, the tense confrontation, President Trump ambushing the president of South Africa.
Up next, another Oval Office meltdown, President Trump ambushing the president of South Africa.
President Trump is being accused of conducting something of a diplomatic ambush of South Africa's president in the Oval Office.
To be with you, I'm Katie Tur. President Trump orchestrated another Oval Office ambush today.
Today, Donald Trump meeting with the president of South Africa and attempting to ambush and humiliate that leader.
Zelensky territory, where essentially he was a bit ambushed inside the Oval Office.
Felt like an ambush in there, kind of like the President Zelensky meeting in the Oval Office.
This was an ambush. It was orchestrated.
Ramaphosa brought his best diplomatic self to this meeting, but nothing could have prepared him for this multimedia ambush.
What started as, to some degree, an ambush.
Well, Katie, I mean, it was an ambush.
Ambush.
Ambushed. Ambush.
An ambush.
Ambushing.
Ambushed inside the Oval Office.
So the talking points went out. They're never very subtle about it. And this was shameless. And talk about coordinated. This was coordinated to a pretty amazing degree, even by these people's standards. But there was one outlet that told the truth, seemingly by accident. Here was a photo that the AP posted, buried in an image gallery inside their article about how South Africa is supposedly safe for white people. But this is an image in that article. And here's the caption, quote, "A view of crosses planted at the White Cross Monument, each one marking a white farmer who's been killed in a farm murder, is seen on a hillside in South Africa." Okay, well, that's the reality of what's happening. And occasionally it gets out. But you won't find similar reporting at the New York Times. Here's how they discussed what the white golfers said in the Oval Office. Quote, "Two of South Africa's most famous golfers were drawn into a tense Oval Office discussion about race in their country on Wednesday after President Trump ambushed his South African counterpart, Cyril Ramaphosa, with videos intended to support his false claim of mass killings of Afrikaners. Mr. Goosen shared that his relatives on farms live behind electric fences in fear of crime, like many other South Africans. But the guys live a great life despite what's going on," he said, close quote. Yes, that's what the New York Times took from the golfer's statement. They left out the fact that the farmers' friends are dead, that the farms are being torched, that his elderly 80-year-old mother was attacked in their home. And the reason they left those details out is that ordinarily, most criminals don't set fire to farms or beat old women for no reason whatsoever. But they will do those things if they're motivated by racial resentment, which is clearly the case in South Africa. Now, over at CNN, meanwhile, they tried to convince their 15 or 16 viewers that the song about killing white farmers, which is often repeated at political rallies in South Africa, really isn't meant to be taken literally. Watch.
There, Larry, has been debate over that song, that anti-apartheid chant, right? And for people who don't have a historical context, it does potentially appear more literal. Talk to us about the debate that has happened inside of South Africa with the recognition of how it appears to people when they hear those words.
It is an inflammatory song, without a doubt. And many in South Africa, even black South Africans, don't think it should be sung in a post-apartheid world, 30 years plus after apartheid. But there are many who grew up under those years of white minority rule who understand the historical context of this song, Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer, that Julius Malema has made popular again. It sort of fell into disuse. It's not been that commonly sung after the end of apartheid in 1994, but it's brought it back again to reanimate the issue of the majority of land in South Africa still being owned by white farmers.
Yes, it's just figurative. It's just, which is why, again, if there was a whole stadium of white people chanting "Kill the blacks," right, they'd be fine with it, right? Because then those white people could say, "No, we just meant it figuratively. That's all. It's just figurative. Figuratively kill them, poetically. Kill them with kindness is what we meant to. Is what we're really trying to say." Yeah, I'm sure they'd buy that argument, right? So you have stadiums of people chanting "Kill the farmer," and then you have farmers being killed. But still, don't draw any connection between those two things. They're simply incapable of bringing themselves to say that, yes, it's bad to call for the mass executions of white farmers. They can't acknowledge that post-colonial South Africa is a failure. For the same reason they can't acknowledge that Rhodesia was a functioning, thriving state, the breadbasket of Africa, they called it, while Zimbabwe, the new name for Rhodesia, is a hellhole that needs to import food in order to avert famine. Like one after another, these post-colonial African states are demonstrating that colonialism wasn't so bad after all. In fact, it turns out better than the alternative. Now, it's obvious why they can't admit any of this. Every single left-wing agenda item, from the modern civil rights movement to DEI, everything is predicated on the idea that past oppression, as they define it, justifies handouts and preferential treatment today. But that logic falls apart when you realize that any effort to supposedly balance things out and make up for the alleged sins of the past only means the murder rate will be 10 times higher than it was in Afghanistan at the height of the U.S. occupation. Everyone is poor. Elderly women are regularly tortured and beaten to death in their own homes. Yeah, that's what that means. That's the reality. And it's gone unsaid for generations, and people in South Africa of all races have suffered because of it. So have people in this country. And it's a lie that yesterday in the Oval Office, Donald Trump confronted and debunked in the most direct way that he possibly could. And in doing so, Trump didn't just demolish one of the central mythologies of the left, one that until now has sustained the vast majority of their depraved social experiments. Trump also signaled that in this administration, doublespeak and innuendo are not going to be the default mode of communication with foreign leaders or anybody else. Instead, we'll be direct. We're not going to cower from the truth or sugarcoat it with euphemism. Every single aspect of society would be improved if we all adopted that level of discourse. We need a lot more of this if we're going to reverse the damage that South Africa's leaders have done. And more importantly, if we're going to prevent that ideology from spreading here. That's been the main goal of true conservatives in this country for many years now. And yesterday in the Oval Office, for the first time since the 1960s, Donald Trump gave us reason to think that we're going to succeed in that effort. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.